Welcome to Sissy Fantasy World, where every story sparkles. Don't forget to subscribe for more magic. I never expected that a single request, spoken in a calm voice over a cup of jasmine tea, would alter the entire direction of my life. When I first agreed to work for her, I thought I understood exactly what I was stepping into. She called herself my mistress, but not in the scandalous way you might imagine. She was a mentor, an employer, and someone whose every word carried a quiet authority. Her name was Marion, and she lived alone in a sprawling old house on the edge of town. People whispered about her. Some insisted she was a recluse. Others claimed she was a brilliant historian who'd simply grown tired of society. I just knew she needed an assistant, and I needed the job. I arrived with practical clothing, a notebook, and very little expectation. The first thing I noticed inside her home was the scent of lavender and dust, tangled beneath the weight of time. Her rooms overflowed with artifacts, boxes stacked in careful piles, cabinets filled with old glass and silk, shelves lined with things that had clearly come from another life. And there, hanging on a lacquered mannequin in the foyer, was the first item that would begin my unexpected journey. A layered petticoat, impossibly delicate, white as morning frost. She caught me staring at it. She always noticed everything. "That piece has tested more than one soul," she murmured. I thought she meant it as a joke. I smiled but couldn't shake the chill that crept over me. I had no idea what she truly meant. The first 2 days were simple enough. I cataloged old letters, hand-stitched banners, and funeral portraits belonging to people no living voice remembered. She guided me with precision, marking down details that only she seemed to recognize. Her voice was warm, but firm, like a candle with a glass shield, soft, focused, untouchable. On the third morning, I found the petticoat laid neatly across the chair in my small room. A handwritten note rested atop its pale folds. "Wear this today." No explanation followed. I hesitated, reading the message over and over, wondering if it was a test. Eventually, with reluctant fingers, I lifted the layers. It weighed next to nothing, yet I felt its presence like a hand pressing against my ribs. I slipped it on over my clothes, expecting her to laugh when she saw me. Instead, she simply nodded. "Good, now you may begin," she said, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. I felt foolish all day. I moved from room to room, dusting shelves that held music boxes and fan-shaped brooches, writing down descriptions of fabrics that whispered when the air shifted. It took hours before I realized I had stopped thinking about how strange the garment felt. Instead, I paid more attention to the rhythm of my own breathing, the way the petticoat swayed around my legs and changed the cadence of my steps. I walked more carefully. I spoke more softly. I wondered why. That night, I removed it with a sense of relief, yet something curious tugged at me, an inexplicable awareness that my reflection seemed altered. I told myself I was imagining things, that wearing unusual clothing could make anyone feel different. Still, when she saw me at dinner, Marion asked, "Did you find anything unexpected?" I shook my head, though the truth scratched at my throat. She smiled, almost knowing, and lifted her glass in a quiet toast to nothing. The next morning, another note appeared. "Wear it again." This time, I didn't question it. I placed the petticoat beneath my clothes before I'd even had tea. Something warm flickered inside me. Not acceptance, not exactly, but curiosity. Every day, she found subtle ways to challenge me. Read aloud from journals written by noblewomen who lived centuries ago, practice old grace drills meant to teach posture, learn the history of fabrics and silhouettes. Somehow, the petticoat made learning feel instinctive, like muscle memory awakening. I asked once why it mattered. She answered without hesitation. "Because you must first feel to understand." At first, I thought she meant understanding history. But slowly, in the echo of my footsteps along old wooden floors, I wondered if she was speaking about something else. The strange routine settled into place more quickly than I expected. Each morning, the petticoat was waiting, sometimes folded on my bed, sometimes hung neatly on the wardrobe door like a silent guardian of expectation. I began to notice how effortlessly it fit me, how it seemed to mold itself around my body as though it had been made with me in mind. I wondered if it had belonged to someone before me, someone who might have stood in these hallways, performing the same tasks under Marion's quiet watch. One afternoon, while sorting a trunk of faded gowns and pale gloves, I felt an odd flutter across my skin, not a draft, but a sensation from within. My hands trembled when I touched the silk lining of a gown that matched the petticoat's shade. Its lace looked fragile enough to disintegrate beneath my fingers, yet when I lifted it, the fabric held strong. I felt a pull like it wanted me to wear it. "A lovely piece," Marian said behind me. I hadn't heard her enter. She often moved without sound, as if she were woven into the walls of the house itself. "It belonged to a leaner." "Who was she?" I asked. She paused, eyes drifting toward a portrait hanging above the fireplace. A young woman with thoughtful eyes, long hair pinned loosely, and a posture both proud and gentle. I hadn't noticed the painting before, though it must have always been there. "She was a student of mine long ago," she said, "very much like you." The idea unsettled me. I glanced at the gown again, imagining a leaner's hands smoothing its bodice, tying its delicate ribbons. Something about the dress felt familiar, though I could not say why. I wanted to ask what had happened to a leaner, but my throat tightened before the words came. Marian noticed, of course. She always noticed. "That is enough for today," she said quietly. "You look pale." That evening, I couldn't stop staring at myself in the mirror. The petticoat changed the way I carried myself. My shoulders rested differently, my chin lifted. I brushed my hair back and saw new softness in the shape of my face. When I blinked, for a moment, I didn't recognize myself. It frightened me more than I wanted to admit. Marian brought me tea just before bed. She did that sometimes, appearing at my door with a tray, as though she sensed when my thoughts grew too heavy. She handed me the cup and studied my expression. "You feel the shift," she said. I swallowed, a little. "It is not a curse," she assured gently. "It is a mirror. Most people look in mirrors only to confirm what they already know. Very few allow mirrors to reveal what they've forgotten." I didn't understand, but her voice soothed some hidden tension, and I drifted to sleep thinking about a leaner and wondering if she had once stood here, confused and restless. As shadows whispered around her. The days grew stranger. I started to hear faint music drifting from the ballroom downstairs, soft strings and piano, playing melodies I didn't recognize. Each time I followed the sound, it disappeared before I reached the door. The house had its secrets, I was certain of it. One morning, while polishing an ornate vanity, I found a small box tucked beneath its drawers. Inside lay a silver hairpin shaped like a blooming branch. Without thinking, I lifted it and pinned it into my hair. The instant I did, a warmth spread across my scalp and down my spine, a gentle pulse that felt like recognition. I stared at my reflection, startled. My features looked softer. Not altered beyond recognition, but changed in a way I couldn't describe. It wasn't magic, exactly, but something close. I returned the pin just as quickly. Yet even after it rested in the box, I still felt its presence, like a whisper at the edges of my thoughts. That evening, I asked Marian about a leaner again. She poured tea for us both, her movements precise, elegant. "A leaner struggled," she said. "She was torn between who she was expected to be and who she truly was. The petticoat helped her listen more closely." "To herself?" I asked. "To the part of herself that had been buried," she said. I felt the meaning settle over me like a veil. Something stirred deep within my chest. I didn't know what I was searching for, but I was certain now that I had already set foot on the path. The next morning, another note waited atop the petticoat. This one read, "Today you must walk the house and listen. Do not speak until night." The request seemed odd, but I obeyed. I spent the day wandering through the rooms, dusty studies filled with letters, sunlit corridors lined with mirrors, storage spaces overflowing with trunks and lace. Each place held a kind of story beneath its silence. As I walked, I felt the petticoat swish, guiding my steps. It was no longer just clothing. It felt like a companion leading me through memories I didn't yet understand. Late afternoon brought me to the ballroom, where sunlight filtered through stained glass, scattering color across the floor. The music returned, soft, haunting. I closed my eyes, let it wash over me, and felt a feeling like déjà vu. For a moment, I swore I wasn't alone. When night fell, I found Marian waiting in the foyer. She inspected me quietly, as though she could read the unspoken experience in my posture. "And what did you learn?" she asked. I opened my mouth, unsure, the truth pressed against my ribs. "The house remembers," I whispered. She nodded, satisfied. "As do you." The next morning felt different. Even before I touched the petticoat, a certain anticipation had settled in my chest. I had begun to notice subtle changes in my reflection, not drastic, but undeniable. My hands looked slimmer, my shoulders softer, and my movements, when I caught myself in mirrors, seemed slower, more deliberate. I tried to tell myself it was just habit, that walking in the petticoat had trained me to carry myself differently. Yet something deeper whispered that I was shifting in ways I couldn't name. Marian had prepared a task for me. A small stack of journals lay on the table, tied with ribbons of muted silk. "Read these aloud," she instructed, her voice calm but commanding. "Imagine the voice behind each word. Speak as if the writer is beside you." I hesitated, the petticoat rustling softly as I moved. The first journal belonged to a woman named Isabel, a quiet seamstress whose letters were filled with longing for a life she could barely touch. As I read aloud, the words seemed to pulse with their own energy. The rhythm of the sentences guided my body. My back straightened, my arms swayed lightly, my voice softened. I could feel myself becoming a vessel for someone else's life. By the time I finished the third journal, a strange clarity settled over me. The petticoat didn't just alter my movements, it seemed to awaken something dormant. I realized I was not simply performing another person's life. I was discovering corners of my own I had never explored. Every syllable I spoke, every sway of the skirt, unearthed a memory or sensation I had long ignored. "At lunch," Marian asked, "do you understand why I asked you to wear it every day?" I looked down at the fabric draping my legs. "I think so," I said cautiously. "It's not just clothing, it's something else. Guidance, maybe." "Exactly," she replied. "You wear it not because you must, but because it allows you to see. People often mistake comfort for truth. They dress to hide, to blend, to conform. This teaches you otherwise." I wanted to ask what she meant by see, but her serene expression discouraged further questions. Instead, I nodded, letting the words sink in. The days that followed became a series of subtle, almost imperceptible shifts. I found myself choosing softer tones when speaking, noticing small details in the house I had previously ignored. The way sunlight kissed the edges of gilded frames, the faint scent of old wood mingled with lavender, the sound of a floorboard creaking in a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. The petticoat became a silent partner, its swish reminding me of the grace I had never cared to cultivate before. One evening, while cataloging a trunk of jewelry, I discovered a pair of delicate gloves embroidered with tiny silver threads. My fingers trembled as I slid them on. The sensation was immediate. My hands felt both lighter and more purposeful, more capable of tenderness and care. Looking in the mirror, I saw a reflection that was almost unrecognizable, someone both familiar and entirely new. I began to understand that the transformation Marian had set in motion was not just about appearance or movement. It was a reshaping of perception, a retraining of attention, an unearthing of identity itself. The petticoat, the journals, the gowns, they were tools, keys to a door I hadn't known existed. Then one night the unexpected happened. I had finished arranging papers in the library when I heard a whisper, a voice too soft to be human, a melody that threaded through the silence. I froze, listening. It came again, clearer this time, a name almost forgotten. Eleanor. My heart skipped. I had thought Eleanor was only part of Marian's past, a story to teach patience or empathy. But the whisper felt alive, present in the room, in the very air. I searched the library, the halls, the shadowed corners, but found nothing. Yet the feeling lingered as though someone was watching, guiding, waiting. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The petticoat felt heavier somehow, though the fabric had not changed. I walked more carefully, imagining that each step might summon the presence of that voice again. By afternoon, Marian approached quietly, carrying a small, wrapped bundle. "This belonged to Eleanor," she said, placing it in my hands. "I think it is time you understand the truth." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a diary, its leather cover cracked and worn, its pages yellowed with age. As I opened it, a single sentence struck me like a spark. To truly know oneself, one must first step beyond fear. Marian watched silently as I read. I felt the weight of her gaze, not as pressure, but as an invitation. The petticoat swished softly around my legs, urging me to continue. I realized in that moment that the transformation she had begun was no longer optional. It was inevitable. Holding Aliner's diary felt like holding a heartbeat. The leather was worn smooth in places, and the pages smelled faintly of rosewater and old ink. I sat in the sunlit corner of the library, the petticoat brushing against the edge of my chair, and began to read aloud. Aliner's words were candid, full of wonder, doubt, and a quiet courage I had never realized I lacked. She wrote of mornings spent arranging her skirts and shoes with meticulous care, of evenings walking the halls of Marian's house, listening to its whispers and the music that drifted through the walls. Her reflections felt eerily familiar, as if she were describing experiences I had already lived. The petticoat swayed gently as I turned each page, almost as though it were responding to the diary's rhythm. By the time I reached the middle, I realized something unsettling. Aliner's words described an awareness of self that was startlingly close to mine. How could that be? I had never met her, never known her life in detail, yet my body and mind resonated with hers in ways I couldn't explain. My reflection in the nearby mirror showed subtle changes again, my posture softer, my gaze steadier, my expression more thoughtful. That evening, Marian appeared at the doorway, silently observing me. "Do you feel it?" she asked. I looked up, unsure what she meant. "The connection," I ventured. "Not connection exactly," she said. "Recognition. You and Aliner share a thread, a way of seeing the world and yourself. The petticoat, the gloves, the gowns, they are not merely clothing. They are keys to perception, to memory, to understanding." I swallowed hard. I don't know if I'm ready to understand. "You will be," she said, smiling softly. "But readiness is less important than attention. You must practice listening." The next day, I began a new routine. I wore the petticoat as always, but this time I moved more deliberately, focusing on every sensation. The fabric against my skin, the gentle swish with each step, the way it shifted when I leaned or turned. I explored the house with heightened awareness, noticing tiny cracks in the walls, patterns in the floorboards, the faint echo of music that seemed to pulse from room to room. I began to hear Aliner's voice again, not as a whisper, but as a presence. It was in the rhythm of the wind, the shift of light across the walls, the hum of the wooden floors. At first, it unnerved me. Was I imagining it? But gradually, I understood that the voice was not a ghost. It was a guide, a reflection of the awareness Marian had spoken about. Then came the first true test. Marian handed me a new garment, a long, flowing dress, pale as dawn, with intricate embroidery that traced patterns of vines and stars. "Wear this for the day," she instructed, "and move through the house without speaking, without pausing. Observe everything." I hesitated, the familiar flutter of nerves in my stomach. This was more than a petticoat now, this dress was a statement. But I obeyed. As I lifted the folds and slid into it, I felt an almost electric awareness course through me. The house seemed to shift in response. Shadows deepened, sunlight flickered, the air seemed richer with scent and sound. I moved from room to room, the dress flowing like liquid silk around my legs. Each step felt deliberate, each motion purposeful. I paused briefly at mirrors, catching glimpses of my reflection. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. My frame appeared more elegant, my movements more fluid, my face carrying a serenity I had never known. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Hours passed like minutes. I spoke not a word, yet felt a growing understanding of the house, its rhythms, and its history. Aliner's presence felt stronger than ever, guiding me, testing me, urging me to notice the smallest details. The way sunlight caught the edge of a silver tray, the slight creak of the stairs, the distant echo of music from a room I hadn't yet explored. When I finally returned to the foyer, Marian was waiting, her gaze calm and knowing. "And what did you see?" she asked. I hesitated, trying to put words to a sensation that was more than vision or sound. "I feel the house," I said slowly. "I feel its past, its stories. I feel her." Marian nodded, satisfied. "Good. You are beginning to listen, not just with your ears, but with your body, your mind, and your presence. That is the path you must follow." That night, lying in bed, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. The petticoat had been the first step, simple and almost trivial in appearance, yet it had awakened something profound. I no longer questioned her methods, though I could not fully explain them. I had begun to feel myself transforming, not just in appearance, but in thought, perception, and identity. The days that followed felt both ordinary and extraordinary, a strange blend of routine and revelation. Each morning, I dressed in the petticoat, or sometimes one of the flowing gowns Marian provided, and moved through the house with purpose. Tasks that had once seemed mundane, dusting shelves, cataloging letters, arranging delicate fabrics, became exercises in awareness. I found myself noticing details I had never seen. The subtle curve of a chair's leg, the faint, threadbare pattern in an embroidered cloth, the way the sunlight shifted across the wooden floor as the day progressed. I began to keep a private journal of my own, recording not only the objects I cataloged, but the sensations and emotions that surfaced while wearing the garments. I wrote about the way my body felt lighter and more attuned, the small thrills of recognition when a leaner's voice or presence seemed to brush against me, the flutter of nerves that accompanied each new gown or pair of gloves. My handwriting became softer, more deliberate, curling at the edges like the script in a leaner's diary. One afternoon, Marian asked me to help her with a task that I had not yet encountered, rearranging a collection of mirrors in the ballroom. They were large, ornate, and slightly tarnished, reflecting fragmented images of the room. She handed me a long, silver-handled brush to dust their surfaces. "These mirrors," she said, "are more than reflective surfaces. They remember. They show not only what is, but what could be. Watch carefully." I felt my pulse quicken. I had never considered mirrors in that way, but as I wiped the glass, the reflection seemed off somehow. Not distorted exactly, but layered. I caught glimpses of myself moving differently, softer, lighter, more graceful. And between the reflections, faint images of a leaner appeared, sometimes standing behind me, sometimes seated in the corner of a mirror's frame, observing, waiting, encouraging. When the task was complete, I turned to Marian. "I saw her," I whispered. "I know," she replied simply. "She is always near when you pay attention. That is why the petticoat was necessary. It is not mere clothing. It is an invitation to perception, to transformation." I spent that night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what transformation truly meant. I was no longer the person who had arrived timidly, unsure of this mysterious house and its owner. Each day, each gown, each movement had reshaped me, teaching me patience, observation, and subtlety. Yet I still felt the stirrings of fear of losing myself, fear of becoming someone entirely unfamiliar, fear of what Marian expected of me next. The following morning brought the first test of courage. Marian instructed me to walk through the house in the petticoat without speaking, without hesitation, carrying a silver tray of fragile glass objects. "Balance and poise," she said. "Mistakes reveal more than success ever will." I felt my stomach tighten. Each object weighed little, but together they demanded focus and precision. I stepped into the hall, feeling the petticoat rustle with each movement. Shadows stretched across the floor, sunlight flickered through the stained glass, and the house seemed to hold its breath as I carried the tray. One slip, one careless step, could shatter the delicate glasses. And yet, as I moved, I felt an unexpected confidence. Eleanor's presence brushed against me like a gentle wind, guiding my hands, steadying my steps. Each swish of the skirt reminded me of the weight I had carried and the strength I was discovering in the act of surrendering to it. I reached the end of the hall without dropping a single object. My chest swelled with relief and triumph, and when I turned, Marian's quiet applause filled the space. "You see," she said, "balance is not only physical. It is emotional, mental, spiritual. The petticoat taught you that." I began to notice subtle changes in the way I perceived myself. My reflection in the mirrors no longer startled me. I recognized the new contours of my posture, the softness in my hands, the grace that had been cultivated through repetition, awareness, and quiet guidance. Even my voice felt different, softer, more expressive, attuned to the rhythms of speech and silence alike. Late that night, I returned to Aliner's diary, reading passages I had skipped before. She had written about fear, about uncertainty, about the moment when she realized that the garments, the rituals, and the attention to detail had shaped her not just externally but internally. As I read, I felt a wave of kinship, as if she and I were connected across time, sharing the same journey, the same lessons, the same unfolding of identity. For the first time, I wondered if the transformation I was experiencing was permanent. I wondered if it mattered. In the quiet, candle-lit room, I felt a deep sense of acceptance. The petticoat had not changed who I was. It had allowed me to see myself more clearly, to explore dimensions of identity that I had never acknowledged. When Marion appeared to check on me, I smiled without hesitation. "I think I understand now," I said. She nodded. "Understanding is a lifelong practice, not a single moment. You are beginning, and that is all that matters." The following days passed with a rhythm that felt both comforting and unsettling. The petticoat had become more than clothing. It was a lens through which I perceived the world, and through which I perceived myself. Every swish, every fold, every subtle tug of fabric against my legs seemed to guide not only my movement, but my thoughts, emotions, and awareness. Even mundane chores felt charged with meaning. Arranging papers, polishing silver, folding delicate linens, walking the halls. Marion began introducing more complex lessons. She asked me to organize rooms according to patterns I could barely discern. The angle of light through windows, the alignment of shadows, the subtleties of color in fabrics and furniture. At first, I struggled. My hands trembled, my mind resisted, and the petticoat felt like a weight rather than a guide. But gradually, I learned to move in concert with the space, to let the folds of the skirt echo the rhythm of the house. One afternoon, she presented a small mirror, no bigger than a hand. "Look closely," she instructed. "Notice what is there and what is missing." I stared into the glass and froze. My reflection looked like me, yet not entirely. My shoulders were softer, my eyes wider, and a certain calm authority radiated from my posture. And behind me, reflected faintly in the corner of the mirror, I saw a figure, a shadowy presence, delicate, poised, unmistakably Aliner. My heart pounded, and for a moment I doubted what I saw. "Do not be afraid," Marion said, appearing beside me as if she had always been there. "She is part of you. She always was. The petticoat allowed you to notice her." "Notice her," I whispered, "but she isn't real." "Real?" Marion asked softly. "Who defines what is real? Your awareness, your perception, your memory, these are real. What you see in mirrors, what you feel in movement, what stirs in your chest, these are truths. Aliner exists in you now because you allowed yourself to see her." The next morning, I wore the petticoat with a heightened sense of purpose. I moved through the house slowly, deliberately, as though each step could summon insight. In the ballroom, the faint music played again, a melody both familiar and unplaceable. My reflection danced in the mirrors, swaying in rhythm with the fabric of the skirt, and for a fleeting moment I felt that I and Aliner were one. Two identities converging, two lives entwined, a bridge between past and present. Marion observed me quietly, her presence almost imperceptible. She never interfered, only guided with a few words, a nod, or a look that encouraged discovery. Her lessons were subtle, requiring patience and attentiveness. I began to understand that her tests were less about skill and more about awareness, about trusting sensations, embracing uncertainty, and observing without judgment. One evening, she asked me to sit at the grand piano in the music room. "Play what you feel," she instructed. "Do not think of technique. Let the house, let Aliner, let the petticoat guide you." I hesitated. I could barely play simple melodies, but I placed my fingers on the keys and something extraordinary happened. As I pressed each note, the room seemed to respond. The petticoat swirled gently, the light shifted, and for the first time I felt a harmony between my body, my mind, and the space around me. The music that emerged was imperfect, hesitant, yet profoundly moving. I realized I was not performing for anyone. I was participating in a dialogue with the house, with Aliner, with Marion, and with myself. Afterward, Marion nodded, as if reading my thoughts. "This is what I meant when I said you must feel to understand. The petticoat is only the beginning. It awakens attention, but attention alone is not enough. You must act, move, respond, and allow yourself to be present. That night, lying in bed, I reflected on the strange path I had taken. I had arrived timid and uncertain, unaware of the subtle currents that shaped the house and the people within it. Now, after weeks of guidance, repetition, and immersion, I felt a growing alignment between my inner self and the external world. I recognized changes in my posture, my voice, my awareness, and yet there was still more to uncover. The next morning brought another note, folded neatly atop the petticoat. Today, you must step outside. Walk beyond the walls of this house and carry its lessons into the world. I stared at the note, a mix of excitement and fear twisting in my chest. Stepping outside seemed both thrilling and impossible. The house had become a cocoon, and I feared losing the delicate balance I had achieved. Yet Marian's calm gaze reminded me that transformation requires courage. The petticoat, she had taught me, was a guide, a companion, a mirror. It had prepared me for this moment. The morning air was crisp as I stepped outside the front door, the petticoat brushing softly against my legs. For weeks, I had moved only within the house, tracing its halls, observing its shadows, listening to its whispers. Now the world beyond awaited, unfamiliar, vast, and unpredictable. I felt a flutter of nervousness, a tug of hesitation, yet also an undeniable thrill. Marian followed me to the doorway but did not step outside. "Remember," she said, "you carry the lessons with you. You are not defined by walls, garments, or mirrors. You are defined by attention, presence, and courage." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. The streets were quiet, lined with autumn leaves swirling in the morning breeze. I walked slowly, deliberately, noticing the textures of cobblestones beneath my shoes, the way sunlight reflected off windows, the faint scent of smoke and damp earth. Each step felt like an extension of the petticoat's sway, a continuation of the rhythm I had cultivated inside the house. People passed by, absorbed in their routines, oblivious to the subtle transformation unfolding in me. I felt self-conscious at first, aware of the difference the skirt made, the unfamiliar softness in my movements, the lightness in my posture. But gradually I realized that the petticoat was no longer just clothing. It was a vessel, a reminder of the awareness, care, and attention I had nurtured. I stopped at a small park bench, watching children play and birds flit among the branches. The world outside seemed alive in ways I had never noticed before. The delicate balance of movement, the interplay of light and shadow, the rhythm of life unfolding quietly yet insistently. For the first time, I felt that the lessons Marian had taught me extended beyond the house. They were part of how I could navigate life itself. Suddenly, I heard a faint voice, soft, unmistakable, yet not coming from anyone nearby. "You are ready," it whispered. Eleanor. My heart leapt. The presence that had guided me inside the house now seemed to follow me outside, woven into the rhythm of the world. I closed my eyes, listening, breathing, moving deliberately, and felt a profound connection between my steps, the fabric of the petticoat, and the currents of life around me. I returned home in the afternoon, the petticoat swishing softly with each step. Marian was waiting in the foyer, calm and serene. "Tell me," she said, "what did you discover?" I hesitated, searching for words. The world, it's full of patterns and movement, of things I never noticed, and I feel connected. I understand more than I thought I could. She smiled, eyes glinting with quiet approval. "Good. Awareness is not confined to walls. It travels with you. It shapes how you perceive, how you respond, how you exist." That evening, I practiced walking the halls again, now aware of the contrast between the controlled interior and the unpredictable exterior. The petticoat seemed to respond differently, as though it adapted to each environment, guiding me in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. I realized that the transformation was not static. It was dynamic, evolving as I moved between spaces, between worlds, between perceptions of myself. The following days were a series of small revelations. I discovered joy in simple movements, the swish of the skirt over polished wood, the gentle sway of the fabric as I reached for objects, the subtle weight of it reminding me to slow down and notice. I observed myself in mirrors and windows, noticing nuances I had never seen, lines softening, posture settling, expressions gaining calm authority. One afternoon, Marian presented me with a new challenge. A task involving the arrangement of several rooms, mirrors, and fabrics, designed to test my awareness, precision, and intuition. She instructed me to move silently, with no spoken words, relying solely on observation, memory, and the guidance of the petticoat. As I moved through the rooms, I realized something profound. The petticoat was no longer a garment. It was a teacher, a reflection, a guide. I had learned to listen with my body, see with my awareness, and act with deliberate care. I began to understand that transformation was not about changing who I was, but uncovering the layers, textures, and rhythms of my identity that had always existed, waiting to be noticed and embraced. By evening, I was exhausted but exhilarated. I had moved through the house with precision, grace, and awareness, discovering new patterns and connections in every room. When Marian approached, she simply nodded, her calm satisfaction mirrored in her eyes. "You are learning," she said, "and soon you will understand why the petticoat was necessary every day. It is not merely fabric. It is the key to noticing, to feeling, to becoming." As I lay in bed that night, the petticoat folded neatly beside me, I felt a growing sense of completeness, yet also a curiosity, a hunger for what remained undiscovered. Eleanor's presence lingered, soft but insistent, and I knew the journey was far from over. The days that followed were a delicate dance between familiarity and discovery. The petticoat had become part of my identity. It swished with my movements, guided my posture, and reminded me to pay attention to details I would have otherwise ignored. Yet there was more at work, subtle but undeniable. Every time I looked in a mirror, I glimpsed a reflection that was both mine and someone else's, a merging of identities that I was only beginning to understand. Eleanor's presence lingered there, her eyes soft but insistent, encouraging me to keep exploring. One morning, Marian handed me a small bundle wrapped in pale linen. Inside was a pair of delicate slippers, embroidered with tiny blossoms. "These belong to Eleanor," she said softly. "They will help you take the next step." I slipped them on, feeling the fine stitching against my skin. The sensation was extraordinary, light, purposeful, almost as if the slippers were whispering instructions to my feet. I walked the halls slowly, deliberately, noticing the subtle way the floor responded to each step, the quiet echo of movement, the patterns of light and shadow. I began to understand that transformation was not only in the garments I wore, but in the way I moved, breathed, and existed in space. That afternoon, Marian asked me to practice a new exercise, walking the house while holding a delicate silver candelabra, balancing it carefully, letting the light reflect through mirrors and polished surfaces. I hesitated, aware of the fragility of the task, but Eleanor's presence seemed to hover beside me, encouraging precision, patience, and awareness. Each step was measured. The candelabra trembled slightly in my hands, and the petticoat swished in rhythm with my movements. I noticed how the reflections multiplied the light, creating patterns across the walls and ceiling. Shadows danced as if alive, responding to my presence. By the time I reached the final room, I realized I had moved with an awareness and grace that I had never known. Marian observed quietly. "The petticoat," she said later, "is not a costume. It is a teacher, a lens, a tool for perceiving the layers of reality that most people miss. You are learning not to imitate but to embody." I felt a swell of understanding mixed with unease. I was changing, undeniably, yet it wasn't just appearance or posture. My perception had shifted. I noticed the world differently, my senses sharper, my mind attuned to subtleties I had ignored before. Even my reflection had begun to soften, taking on a serenity I had never known. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the voice I had heard earlier, the soft, insistent presence of Eleanor. It was no longer a whisper but a constant companion, gently guiding my thoughts and actions. I realized that I was not merely wearing a petticoat. I was inhabiting a space between past and present, between who I had been and who I was becoming. The next morning, Marian instructed me to step into the ballroom alone. "Today," she said, "you will dance." My heart raced. I had never danced before, not formally, not deliberately. Yet I obeyed, slipping into the gown I had worn so often, the petticoat swishing beneath it, and stepping into the large, sunlit room. The air was thick with possibility, the polished floor reflecting every movement, every flicker of light. I moved cautiously at first, unsure of the rhythm, my body hesitant. But as I allowed myself to feel the fabric, the light, the space, I began to flow. The petticoat guided me, responding to every motion, every shift of weight. I felt Aline's presence again, a steadying hand at my side, encouraging me to surrender to the movement, to let awareness and grace guide my steps. Minutes passed like hours. My movements became more confident, fluid, expressive. I twirled, spun, and let the petticoat flare naturally, tracing patterns across the polished floor. Each rotation, each sway, revealed a layer of myself I had not known. Timidness transformed into confidence, uncertainty into awareness, hesitation into deliberate action. When I finally stopped, breathless and exhilarated, Marion was there, silent but radiating approval. "You see now," she said quietly, "the petticoat does not constrain you. It frees you. It teaches you presence, patience, and perception. And in this freedom, you begin to discover who you truly are." That night, I returned to Aline's diary. Her words resonated more deeply than ever. To truly know oneself, one must step beyond fear, embrace movement, and honor the subtleties of perception. Only then is transformation complete. I closed the diary and looked at my reflection. The petticoat lay neatly folded beside me, its presence both comforting and affirming. I understood, more clearly than ever, that the journey was far from over, yet I had crossed an invisible threshold. I had begun to inhabit not only the physical garments but the inner landscapes they revealed, the careful attention, the grace, the awareness, the courage to move and exist fully. The following morning, I awoke with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt before. The petticoat lay neatly on the chair, waiting, a quiet invitation. I slipped it on and felt immediately at ease. By now, the fabric was less a garment and more an extension of myself, a familiar guide that moved in tandem with my thoughts and body. Marion appeared quietly, carrying a bundle of fabrics and ribbons. "Today," she said, "you will create your own ensemble. Choose freely but move deliberately. Let the process teach you, as the petticoat always has." I hesitated, overwhelmed by choice, but Marion's calm gaze reminded me that the journey was mine to navigate. I selected fabrics carefully, letting my instincts guide me. I layered silks and linens, tying ribbons with deliberate attention, adjusting folds to create rhythm and balance. With each motion, I felt Aline's presence, a subtle awareness guiding my hands and encouraging patience. When the ensemble was complete, I stood in front of the mirror. I didn't see just clothing. I saw identity, intention, and transformation woven into every fold and layer. My reflection no longer startled me. It affirmed the journey I had undertaken. The petticoat beneath the layers swayed gently as I moved, reminding me of the path I had walked and the awareness I had cultivated. Marion observed silently, as she often did, her presence steady and encouraging. "You understand now," she said softly, "that the petticoat was never about mere appearance. It was about presence, attention, and the courage to explore and inhabit your own identity fully." I nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude and clarity. I realized how much I had grown in these weeks, the careful attention to detail, the awareness of movement and space, the recognition of Aline's guidance within myself. I had learned not just to wear the garments, but to let them teach me about perception, grace, and self-understanding. Later, Marion asked me to walk the house slowly, observing every detail, listening to every sound. I moved deliberately, my steps guided by the swish of the petticoat, noticing textures, light, and shadows. I realized that transformation was ongoing, not a final state. Each movement, each observation was a practice, a reminder that identity and awareness are cultivated continuously, through attention and care. By evening, I returned to the diary, reading Aline's final entries. She wrote of moments of clarity, of understanding her own presence and identity through the garments and exercises Marion provided. Her words resonated deeply. The petticoat was never just clothing, the mirrors were never just reflections, the lessons were never mere tasks. They were tools for discovering the self, for embracing awareness, and for moving with intention and grace. That night, I stood before the mirror, fully dressed in the ensemble I had created. The petticoat swayed gently beneath, a constant companion, a reminder of the journey. I understood now that the transformation was not just external. It was a deep, unfolding process that shaped my perception, my awareness, and my identity. Marian entered silently, observing my reflection. She smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "You have come far," she said. "But remember, the journey continues. Awareness, presence, and transformation are never complete. They are practices cultivated moment by moment, day by day." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle within me. The petticoat lay beneath the layers of my ensemble, swishing softly as I moved, a constant guide, a silent teacher, a reminder of the path I had walked and the awareness I had cultivated. I realized finally that the garments, the lessons, and the house had not changed me. They had revealed me. They had shown me who I was beneath doubt, hesitation, and fear, attentive, graceful, aware, and capable of embracing the subtleties of life fully. The following morning felt like the culmination of everything I had experienced, yet also the beginning of something far larger. I dressed in the petticoat, letting its soft folds settle around my legs. It no longer felt like a test, a restriction, or even a novelty. It felt like a home, a familiar rhythm, a companion that moved with me rather than against me. Marian appeared quietly, holding a leaner's diary and a small box of accessories. "Today," she said softly, "you will reflect on everything, on who you were, who you are, and who you are becoming. The petticoat has taught you presence, grace, and awareness, but now you must see yourself fully, without hesitation or fear." I nodded, my chest tightening with anticipation. I took the diary in my hands and read through the entries once more, savoring the words that had guided me through the unfolding of identity. Each passage resonated differently than before, enriched by the awareness I had cultivated through the garments, the exercises, and the silent teachings of the house. Marian guided me to the grand mirror in the ballroom. The room was bathed in sunlight, the polished floor reflecting the light in intricate patterns. She gestured for me to stand still and observe my reflection. I did, and for the first time, I didn't see only a person shaped by fabric and posture. I saw the merging of past and present, of my own self and a leaner's influence, of hesitation transformed into confidence. The petticoat swayed gently as I shifted my weight, the folds moving in harmony with the rhythm of my body. "You see now," Marian said, her voice calm but carrying depth. "The petticoat was never a punishment, a novelty, or a trick. It was a teacher, a guide, a key. Every movement, every fold, every reflection has revealed layers of yourself that you had yet to recognize. You have learned attention, awareness, and grace, not by imitation, but by inhabiting every moment fully." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight and significance of her words. I thought of my first hesitant steps in the petticoat, of the tremor of uncertainty in my hands, of the way I had resisted and questioned, of the gradual acceptance and understanding that had unfolded with each day. And I realized that every swish, every careful motion, every silent reflection had shaped me not into someone else, but into a fuller, more attentive version of myself. Marian stepped back, a quiet pride in her eyes. "Remember," she said, "transformation is never complete. Life continues to teach, to challenge, to reveal. The petticoat, the lessons, a leaner's presence, they are tools, but the practice, the awareness, the courage, they are yours to carry always." I nodded, a profound clarity settling over me. I felt no fear, no hesitation. The petticoat, once a strange, heavy garment, now felt like a part of me, an enduring reminder of patience, presence, and the subtle power of perception. I had learned to move with grace, to observe deeply, to inhabit my own identity fully, and to listen to the layers of the world and self that had always been waiting to be noticed. That evening, I returned a leaner's diary to Marian and placed the petticoat neatly in my room, but I knew it was never truly gone. It lived in me, in my awareness, in the rhythm of my steps, in the careful attention I now brought to every action. The house, Marian, the lessons, they had not changed me into someone else. They had revealed who I was, patiently, insistently, and beautifully. As I stood in front of the mirror one last time before bed, I smiled softly at my reflection. The folds of the petticoat shimmered faintly in the candlelight, as if acknowledging the journey we had shared. I felt gratitude, clarity, and a quiet joy. I was transformed, not in the way I had feared, but in the way that truly mattered, fully present, attentive, aware, and deeply myself. The house was quiet, the air soft, the shadows long and familiar. I took a final breath, feeling the gentle sway of the petticoat in memory, a reminder of discovery, courage, and the quiet unfolding of identity. And in that stillness, I understood fully. The journey had revealed the truth all along. I was exactly who I was meant to be.